Have you ever been in a group of 3 friends and felt like the odd one out? Like the other two had something between them that you were never fully part of? Like no matter how long you had all been friends, there was always a pair and then there was you. Or maybe you were one of the two. Maybe you never noticed it at all until one day the third person said something and you realized they had been feeling invisible for a long time. Trio friendships are one of the most common social structures in human life. They are also one of the most quietly painful. 3 seems like a natural number, big enough to feel like a group, small enough to feel close. And for a while, it works. The 3 of you find a rhythm. You have your inside jokes and your group chat and your way of moving through the world together. It feels solid. It feels like enough. And then slowly, almost without anyone meaning for it to happen, the structure starts to shift. 2 people get closer. The third starts to feel it, and nobody says anything because nobody wants to be the one who ruined it. Here is what the research actually says about this. Groups of 3 are inherently unstable, not because the people in them are bad at friendship, not because something is wrong with the dynamic, but because of basic social math. When 3 people are together, 2 will always have more in common at any given moment than the third. 2 will always find it slightly easier to connect on a particular day, a particular topic, a particular mood. That is not betrayal. That is just how human connection works. But the third person does not always experience it as math. They experience it as rejection. Think about the last time you were in a 3-person conversation. Someone made a joke. 2 people laughed immediately. The third smiled a second later. Someone suggested a plan. 2 were immediately on board. The third agreed, but felt something shift. Someone needed support. 2 of them had a long conversation about it. The third found out later. These are small things, tiny things, things that nobody would call a problem. But they add up, and over time, the person on the outside of those small moments starts to build a story about what they mean. That story usually sounds something like this. They are closer to each other than they are to me. I am the extra one. I am only here because we all started together. If they met today without me already in the picture, they would not choose me. That story may or may not be true. But once it starts, it is very hard to stop. Because every small moment that follows gets filtered through it. Every time the other 2 text each other separately. Every time plans get made without the full group. Every time a reference gets made to a conversation you were not part of, it all becomes evidence. Psychologists have a name for this. They call it the third wheel effect. And what makes it particularly difficult is that it is almost never intentional. The 2 people who are closer are usually not trying to exclude anyone. They are just following the natural pull of connection. They have more in common right now. They text each other because it is easy. They make plans because they live closer, or work similar hours, or happen to like the same things. They are not building a wall. But the third person is standing on the other side of one anyway. And here is what makes it worse. The third person usually cannot say anything. Because what do you say? You cannot tell your friends that you feel left out without sounding insecure. You cannot point to specific moments without sounding like you are keeping score. You cannot say I feel like the least important one without risking the friendship entirely. So you say nothing. You keep showing up. You keep being present and warm and acting like everything is fine. And inside, you are slowly convincing yourself that you matter less than the other 2. That your place in the group is the weakest one. That silence has a cost. Not just in the friendship, but in the person carrying it. People who spend extended time feeling like the third wheel in a close friendship start to internalize the feeling. It stops being about this specific group and starts being about them. They start to believe that this is just how it goes for them. That they are always the one who ends up on the outside. That they are likable, but not lovable. That people enjoy them, but do not need them. That they are easy to include, but easier to forget. And they carry that belief into every friendship that comes after. Now here is the other side of this. Because trio friendships do not only hurt the third person, they hurt the pair too. In ways that are less obvious, but just as real. When 2 people in a trio become closer, there is often a quiet guilt that comes with it. A sense that they are doing something wrong by having a stronger connection with one person. So they manage it. They hold back a little. they avoid being too close in front of the third person. They include everyone, even when the dynamic is forced. They perform equality because they know the alternative feels cruel, and performing equality is exhausting. There is also a particular pressure that the closest pair puts on each other. When two people in a trio rely on each other more heavily, that relationship carries more weight than it was maybe built to carry. Every disagreement between them becomes higher stakes because there is less room to move. If the pair falls out, the whole trio fractures. If one of them gets closer to the third person, the other feels it immediately. The friendship that felt like the most solid part of the three is actually the most fragile, because it is holding up more than just itself. Think about how trio friendships handle conflict. In a two-person friendship, disagreement is contained. You work it out or you do not. In a trio, conflict is never just between two people. It always involves the third, sometimes as a mediator, sometimes as a confidant for one side, sometimes as the person both sides are suddenly competing for. The third person who felt invisible in the good times suddenly becomes very visible when something goes wrong. And that is its own complicated thing, realizing that your value in the group spikes during crisis and drops during calm. Here is something that almost never gets said. The person who feels like the third wheel is not always the weakest link in the friendship. Sometimes they are the one holding the whole thing together. They are the one who keeps the peace, who remembers both sides of things, who makes sure nobody drifts too far, who puts in the work of maintaining the group when the other two are absorbed in each other. They are the connective tissue, and connective tissue does not get much credit. It just gets taken for granted until it finally gives out. There is a reason trio friendships are so common in adolescence. When you are young and still figuring out who you are, having a group feels essential, and three is small enough to feel intimate. But adolescence is also when the patterns get set, when the third wheel learns to be quiet about feeling left out, when the pair learns that closeness can coexist with guilt, when everyone learns to perform group harmony even when the actual dynamic is uneven. Those lessons do not stay in adolescence. They follow people into their adult friendships and their adult relationships and their adult way of moving through groups of people. Adults in trio friendships often replay the same patterns they learned when they were teenagers. The same silence, the same performance of equality, the same slow drift where two people get closer and the third feels it and says nothing. The same crisis that eventually surfaces because silence can only hold so long. The faces are older. The stakes feel higher, but the structure is identical. Because the structure was never really about age. It was about the math of three. And the math of three does not change just because the people doing it have grown up. Something worth naming directly. Trio friendships almost always end in a pair. Not always dramatically. Not always with a falling out or a big conversation or a clean break. Sometimes it just slowly becomes clear that two of the three are the core and the third is adjacent. Sometimes the third person drifts away without anyone asking why. Sometimes they get absorbed into a different group and everyone acts like that is natural and nobody says what actually happened. The trio becomes a pair with an occasional guest, and the guest pretends not to notice what they became. That ending, quiet, undramatic, nobody's fault, is in some ways harder than a real falling out. A falling out gives you something to point to, a reason, a moment, something that makes sense of the loss. When a trio just quietly reorganizes itself around a pair, the third person is left with nothing to hold. No reason, no conversation, no closure. Just the slow realization that the group they thought they were in was not quite the group they actually were in. And the question that follows them, was it always like this and I just did not see it? Here is what that question does to a person. It makes them go back through everything, every memory of the three of them together, every moment they thought was equal and shared, every time they felt like a real part of it. And they start to wonder how much of it was real and how much of it was them being included out of kindness, out of habit, out of the fact that removing them would have been too awkward. That kind of retroactive doubt is brutal. It does not just hurt the friendship that ended, it casts a shadow over everything that came before it. And it shapes how they enter the next group. They are more watchful now, more alert to the dynamics, more likely to notice when two people laugh a second faster than they do, more likely to interpret normal variation in closeness as a sign of where they actually stand, more likely to hold back a little, to not fully invest, to keep one foot outside the door of every group they join, because they learned something. Not a wrong lesson exactly, just a hard one. That in a group of 3, someone usually ends up on the outside, and they already know how that feels. None of this means trio friendships are not worth having. Some of the most important relationships in people's lives have been built inside a group of 3. Some trios stay genuinely balanced for years. Some find a rhythm that works and hold on to it. But the ones that do are usually the ones where the dynamic is named, where people are honest about the unevenness instead of performing equality, where the third person is allowed to say, "I felt left out," without it being treated as an attack, where the pair is allowed to acknowledge their closeness without feeling guilty for it. Honesty is the only thing that gives a trio a real chance. So if you are in a trio right now, think about which seat you are sitting in. Think about whether the dynamic you are performing matches the dynamic you are actually feeling. Think about the things that are going unsaid and what it is costing everyone to keep them unsaid. You do not have to do anything with that right now. But you know. You have probably always known. And knowing, really seeing it clearly without flinching, is the only honest place any of this can start from.